Kia ora, my name is Bryde. I'm a research coordinator here at Auckland Museum. I've been an avid marine scientist for over 10 years and I love everything to do with the ocean, whether it be swimming, diving, boating, or even just getting in and learning everything I can about it.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Enika. I'm a Marine Projects Manager for Inkfish, a newly established marine organisation that has recently worked with the Auckland Museum and Ngāti Kuri on their program Te Mana o Rangitāhua. And for me, I love everything about the ocean. I'm an avid diver. I grew up on a little 30-foot yacht, and this project was really important to us because it's something we're both really passionate about.
Whale Tales is an immersive art sculpture trail that is run by WWF and Wild and Art. There are going to be 80 large whale tail sculptures scattered all over Tāmaki Makaurau, and coming soon in mid-March, we're going to have some small pepe tails that are made by school children, and they'll just be a little bit smaller.
And the purpose of Whales Tales is to connect with the community of all ages to highlight the significance and the beauty of the Hauraki Gulf as well as our ocean around Aotearoa, New Zealand.
With only 135 Bryde's whales left in the Hauraki Gulf, it's really important that we come together to raise money, to raise awareness in different forms and different ways to be able to save these amazing animals.
May last year, Bryde and I received a 1.8 metre whale tail sculpture in our garage. It was huge, to be fair, we weren't expecting it to be that big. So over the last year, we actually changed jobs. I ended up moving in with Bryde because we were in lockdown and it was the only way that we could paint, and it was a lot easier working on it together. And so we started with a base coat. Bryde got a really nice gradient all the way down, and then over the last end of the year, we chose the plankton that we wanted. We went through and there was a reason why each of the plankton are on there. Bryde also helped us work out where it fitted on the tail, so if you actually look at it really closely, all of the plankton on the top are actually, if you found them in the ocean, they do sit in that upper level where the sunlight is. So where your phytoplankton, the plants, are all sitting at the top, and your zooplankton, which also sit there, and then as you go down the tail where it gets to the deeper water, you actually get your zooplankton that live in your really deep depths. And the plankton that we chose, we scanned right across the internet finding our favourite ones, and we wanted to portray these as accurate as possible so you guys could see what we would see under a microscope.
After 500 painstaking hours, which was all fun and we're absolutely passionate about it, so for us it didn't seem like that big of a chore. We've tried to put as much detail and try to highlight the incredible diversity and alien-like forms that these animals and plants have. The cool thing about plankton is that some of the animals that you know really well, say kinna, they actually look very different once they've hatched from an egg. They look like spaceships, which is really cool. And then you've got animals like crabs. So crabs look very different when they've hatched out of their eggs as well. Right behind me here, we've got a larval crab, and this one's actually got a really long antennal snout. But when they become older, they lose that, and they have that shortened snout, and then they look like the crab that you all know and love. We also have lots of larval fish. So fish, they change morphologically a lot over time. They may start off looking like little tadpoles, but then they start to grow their fins, their appendages, and really amazing colours. And we like to capture that transition from egg phase all the way to young juvenile phase, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that when you have a look at all the creatures on the tail. So throughout the years that we've known each other, we love doing science communication. We're great marine advocates. We want to share our passion that we have for the ocean with everybody else, whether you're young or old. We also do photography as well, so that's part of the creative tools that we have in our system to be able to portray some of those amazing things that not everyone gets to see when they're out swimming.
And we found that painting was just another way of being able to show something that not many people knew about in a way that was really visual. Other projects that we've been able to work on, there was a VR program when we were at Blake, NZVR, where we were able to go into schools, put headsets on all of the students and actually show them what it looks like beneath the surface. Because for a lot of people, when you look out to the ocean, that surface is like a barrier and it's really hard to imagine what it's like underneath. And so for us, we're constantly trying to find ways to break that barrier and show people the whole world that lives beneath the surface.
Hopefully, once people have seen our tail, when they go out swimming next or when they go out to the beach, they might come across some jelly-like things. These are your salps. You know, I'm hoping that people will actually pick up the salps, have a look, and they'll actually know what they are, and that they're not always jellyfish. I hope that people appreciate that there's so many different kinds of life in our ocean, but also don't get freaked out. You will swallow some plankton, but it's not bad for you. Because plankton is so vital to our ocean organisms, as well as us as humans, we wanted to use Tiny to the Mighty to communicate to people about some of the threats that some of our plankton are facing. The threats that we've caused to our plankton include pollution, so things like microplastics that some of our larval fish actually eat, and where does that end up? It ends up in our tummy once they grow up, right? And also things like oil pollution and chemical pollution. Those things can cause mass die-off of plankton, which is really bad. Another big threat to plankton is climate change. So with climate change, we have warming waters, and that can affect plankton because they've never been overheated really before, and also it induces ocean acidification. Now, with ocean acidification, as waters become more acidic, plankton that have calcium carbonate shells, so stuff that we use in our teeth, they can start to erode and start to break away and affect things like sea snails, they can affect things like, crayfish, shellfish, all these things that we love to eat as well are going to be affected by climate change.
So we've collected some questions from our museum visitors, and we thought we'd ask each other some of these questions so you guys can find out a bit more about plankton. So the first one was, how do you catch plankton?
That's a really good question. So plankton like this are really, really tiny and microscopic. You can't even see it without using a microscope. So the best way to catch them is to use a really special net. So a plankton net is a long net, and what it does is it has a really, really fine mesh. That mesh is microscopic. I'm talking about less than a hair's width of mesh size. So you can catch all the tiny plankton, you can catch all the tiny phytoplankton, which are your tiny plants, and what you do is the water goes through the net and collects at the very end, and that's the cod end. Now that cod end is where all the plankton accumulate, and then when you open the tap to get your plankton out, you end up with a plankton soup, just like in this jar. I've got a question for you, Enika.
Mm-hmm.
How much plankton do whales eat in one sitting?
Millions! If you think about the ocean, what we were just talking about, how they're tiny microscopic little organisms, and then you think about how big a whale is, and even in just one gulp, how much would be in the water that it took in, it would be millions. And if you're thinking of krill as well, it'd be tons of krill that sustains these massive whales here in the Hauraki Gulf. Okay, what would happen if plankton became extinct? Would it only affect the whales?
That's a really good question. So as we talked about before, plankton are not just important food for our small fish, and then when you move up the food chain, we start moving into your larger animals like your dolphins and your whales. But for whales, they're an important food source because they can filter those tiny animals. But remember, we also talked about plankton providing half of the oxygen that we breathe. So if we got rid of all the plankton in our ocean, what are we going to do to get the rest of our oxygen? I don't even know.
So I'd say they're pretty important.
Yeah, it would be pretty disastrous if we lost all the plankton in our ocean. So here's another question, Enika.
Mm-hmm.
How do people observe and learn about the relationship between whales and plankton?
It's a great question. I would say the best thing is just being interested and engaged and trying to find out. There's great resources here at the Auckland Museum where you can come in and use the microscopes and have a look down at that tiny level, and even going out and seeing the whales yourself, and you'll see them feeding, they'll sit on the surface. And so it's a great way of understanding that even though we can't see them, they're still there and how important they are. So just get out there and have a look, I would say, is the best way of seeing it.
I'm just going to throw this question in here. Enika, you grew up on a boat. Did you ever see the water light up in the dark? What's that stuff? What's causing that light?
So that's phosphorescence. So at night time, what we'd do is we'd turn off all the lights on the boat, and we'd actually get buckets of water or a water gun, and we'd spray it into the water, and it would just light up. And that is another type of plankton that you can see with your eyes, which is really cool. And if you're really clever, you can write your name in the water. Okay, back to you. Do whales eat other food other than plankton?
So whales generally are categorised into two groups. We have baleen whales and we have toothed whales. Baleen whales are whales like your humpback whales. You've also got Bryde's whales and you've got right whales. These whales, instead of having teeth, they have these comb brush-like things in their mouth called baleen. And what happens is when they take a big gulp of water like you were talking about before, they filter out all of the tiny little plankton in there and shrimp and things, and then they swallow that as their food source. Toothed whales, however, they include your sperm whales, your beaked whales, and other cetaceans like dolphins and orcas. They have teeth. they use these teeth to actually catch small little fish. So it's not just plankton, it's also small fish that our cetaceans eat. Annika, I've got a fun question for you now. So for those of you who go to see the Tiny to the Mighty at the Auckland Museum, you may find there's an odd plankton ouch. So, is Sheldon Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants an accurate representation of plankton?
Yes, so Plankton, that you'd know in SpongeBob, when I painted him, he was one of my first ones because I wanted everyone to kind of be able to look at him and know exactly what we're talking about when we look at all the different types of plankton. So he's actually a copepod, and we have one actually up on the microscope now, and so he is the type of plankton that we do get in the ocean, and he's a really good way of connecting, especially a younger generation, to talk about plankton and why they are important. So if you do find him, he was my favourite.
And contrary to Sheldon Plankton on SpongeBob SquarePants, our copepods aren't out to go dominate the world. They're very lovely, and they are actually really important as a major food source for a lot of our small fish.
WWF have developed an app to go along with whale tails that has an interactive map where you can see all of the whale tails across Tāmaki Makaurau. So you can go around and search and actually collect them, and you'll be able to see a little bit of a bio of the artist and who's been able to sponsor it.
Using the app, you can actually go and collect every single tail, and our mini tails will be coming out very soon. On the app, you can also get lots of rewards. Did you know that? And it tracks how far you've been walking, what's been the most collected tail, and you can also vote for your favourite tail.
So we hope you've enjoyed this talk. We've really loved sharing with you our passion around plankton, and hopefully if you get a chance, definitely have a look outside the Auckland Museum and check out Tiny to the Mighty.